Thank you so much. And Wendy and I have had this agreement. I will stop and drink some water every so often, and she will ask for questions. So if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box. Is that the right place, Wendy?
Yep, the Q&A or the chat box, either one.
Okay, she's going to monitor that. I have it open, but I'm going to try and focus on the presentation. So let's talk about why product roadmaps. The whole purpose of a product roadmap is to gain a little bit of perspective. What do we want to do now? What's a little later? And especially in the case of an Agile approach, what are our alternatives? Where are the experiments? So that's the purpose of a roadmap. And here's what I often see. It's a time-based wish list. Yeah, easy for me to say. Clearly not enough coffee this morning. So if you look at this image, you can see everything lines up on a quarter. We're going to release on a quarter. The feature sets fit into a quarter. We're going to release internally at least once a month, if not more often. This is something I see a lot in very large programs. So that internal releasing only once a quarter and external releasing once a quarter. And look at this. Isn't it nice that it lines up on quarters? More about that in a minute. So I often find it really helpful to think in quarters. I can see the big picture where the product is headed. It's a quarterly based approach is much more resilient than a yearly plan for specific deliverables and budget. But in an Agile approach, where's the feedback? Right? If we think that we have a hypothesis and we're going to run an experiment, we're going to gather data and learn from the results that feeds back into the hypothesis. This is the essence of an Agile approach is double loop learning. So we have hypotheses about our process, and we have hypotheses about our products, and the fact that we examine both the process and the product on a regular basis, that gives us the double loop learning. So if we don't have feedback, how can we possibly do this? So I am a child of the 60s. Yes, I will just freely admit to it. And back then, we had triptychs. So triptychs showed you the path to your overall destination. If you look at the image on the right-hand side of this, you can see that green highlighted route that says go from here down to there. But what's interesting is that the triptych shows you alternative paths. So what the interesting thing with triptychs was, and especially, well, if you ever traveled with my parents, you would actually have the option to discover new and different places to eat. So we always found really interesting diners and really interesting little local places that were off the highway. So we took advantage of the side spurs to experiment, at least with our eating, if not the actual trip. So we could see the local alternatives and still see the big picture. So when we think about an Agile approach, I would like you to think more in triptychs, where the overall destination does not change. You still want this product, but you want to be able to see your various options to get there. Now, let me remind you of what the Agile approach is. We have the big ideas that come into this responsible person, often called the product owner. The product owner ranks the backlog for a cross-functional team that can deliver shippable increments on a regular basis. So, and if you guys know me, you know I really like one-day stories so that the team actually ships when possible, a one-day finished product into the code base. Now, you might not be able to release it outside the building, but you can release it inside the building so everybody else can see. At some point, the team does a demo of a collection of whatever they've finished. Maybe they do little demos to the product owner, and then they do larger demos on a weekly or biweekly basis to everybody else. Because finishing one little story doesn't show the whole picture, right? That might be hard to see, but when you collect a few stories, now you can show the demo and you can do the retrospective, which helps you examine your process and the product, right? What was your process for producing this product? How well is this product meeting the needs of its customers? Where else do you need to experiment? So this business of shippable product on a regular basis means we really need outcomes. So if you are still doing stories that say, as a developer, I want a database, that's an output. That's not an outcome. An outcome answers questions. It informs future work. Outputs are just finished work. Yes, we do need outputs in order to accomplish outcomes, but if the roadmap is about outputs, we are not talking about the problems we need to solve or the questions we need to answer. And that's a huge, huge issue. So let's talk about how deterministic the problems that you want to solve are. Very few people in software have totally deterministic, all the way on the left, problems where they don't need to do any discovery at all. And there are not that many organizations that have totally non-deterministic problems that they need to do some recursive discovery. Now, if you are part of an advanced R&D department or you are exploring a brand new product space for your company, you might be in this totally non-deterministic recursive discovery area for a while. And then you will move back to where most problems are, somewhere in the middle, where you need to do some recursion on discovery, but you need to do more delivery. So if you think about the left-hand side of this totally deterministic focus on delivery issue, those are the problems you need to solve, where the risk is in delivery but not in discovery. That's okay. You might use an Agile approach just to make sure you are delivering on a regular basis. But the place where an Agile approach really shines is where we really need innovation in the product, because the problems are not deterministic. We have several options. We could go we could choose option A, we could choose option B, we could choose option C, and even worse, options D, E, and F. And we don't know until we do some experiments to understand what to do about that. So I have this little table, which might be helpful to you. If the customer's problem is well understood, which are typically keep the lights on kinds of work, this is the much more deterministic. The roadmap duration is as long as reasonable. And the question is, when do you want to end of life this particular product, right? So the reasons for an Agile approach is you might need to know when to stop, that it's time to end of life this. It's not doing anything more for you. Again, most of you will have the customer problem in the middle, where we mostly understand it. We have this current product set where we show the MVPs in the roadmap and limit to a reasonable planning horizon. I will talk about reasonable